Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Luke Cage Season 1. This video is where I review the first season of the Netflix series Luke Cage. The first part of this review will be spoiler free, however I will have a spoiler section where I get more into some spoilers of Season 1, but I will give a warning before I begin that section. So Luke Cage is the third show in the Netflix Marvel series, which is set in the same universe as the Marvel feature films, but have a more gritty and less family-friendly feel to it. And they also try a bit more to be grounded in reality. And overall, what I thought about this show was, it was pretty good. It was pretty solid. It never got great or amazing, but it never got horrible or shitty. So it was pretty consistent in terms of quality, which is quite different from shows like Jessica Jones or Daredevil Season 2, both of which I thought were very up and down in terms of quality, where I thought moments of it were amazing, but then I had a lot of major issues with some other parts of it. So it would go from being really great to really bad, where Luke Cage wasn't like that at all. I found Luke Cage was mainly lacking in the originality department, as the original comic was based off the 70s blaxploitation films like Shaft, which always follow a typical action movie plot similar to like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Steven Seagal movies of the 80s and 90s, and it really does feature all the same tropes, where one man is out on a personal quest motivated by revenge because they killed someone he loves, so he goes off on a mission to take down a crime syndicate. It's a story that's been done a billion times before. It does try to change things up by adding a superhero element by making Luke Cage super strong and impervious to bullets. But if you think about it, the main character these action heroes play, like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal, also have unnaturally high abilities to kill people and do appear to be impervious to bullets, as they never get killed no matter how many people are shooting at them. So I'm not saying following this typical format automatically makes it bad. The show works with the format very well by having a cast of interesting and fully fleshed out characters, none the least being Luke Cage himself, whose history is explored in depth, and he does come off as a believable and interesting human being, not just a nameless superhero. However, what I am saying is that it limits it in terms of originality, which means it can only go so far. The main villain of the show, Cottonmouth, also reminds me a bit too much of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin from Daredevil, so it doesn't even come off as original in the Marvel Netflix universe. That being said, the whole style, music, acting, cinematography is all very impressive, and the pace the show sets is pretty brisk, which works really well for the story. As I said, it never really dives in quality and is pretty solid throughout. However, I do think the last few episodes aren't quite as good as the first half of the series, as I did have some issues with it, but it never gets really bad. There wasn't any overall storylines I thought were horrible, such as the Hand storyline from Daredevil Season 2, nor did it have any major flaws, such as focusing too much on the villain like in Jessica Jones, but it also never really stands out like those other two shows did. Like most of these Marvel Netflix shows, it also has a very realistic, gritty feel to it that seems more like a dynamic drama than a cliched comic book movie. However, the nods this show tries to make to the original comic stick out like a sore thumb. Now, I never heard of, much less read, any of the Luke Cage comic books, but even so, it wasn't hard to tell when they were making nods to it. None the least is Luke Cage's catchphrase, "Sweet Christmas," and the first time he said that I was like, what? But it didn't take me long to realize that it was his catchphrase from the comics, and it was so out of place in the show. It didn't seem to fit his character at all. And the actor who played Cage, who otherwise did an amazing job, but whenever he said that line, you could tell he didn't really know how to deliver it because it was so corny and out of place for his character. I'm not sure why they bothered. I mean, In the X-Men movies, Wolverine doesn't go around calling people bub like he does in the comics, and frankly, if he did, it would actually fit in a lot more than Luke Cage saying "Sweet Christmas." And there were a couple of other, one-off costume decisions that appeared in a scene, a couple of scenes that many criticized as being ridiculous and out of place, as they were obvious nods to the comic book, but they didn't really bother me that much. They didn't seem as out of place as Luke Cage saying "Sweet Christmas" all the time. So my rating for Luke Cage out of 10 is a 7 very good. It's a good, solid show that I would recommend watching, as it's certainly entertaining, with interesting characters, and it is a fun watch. However, I never really felt addicted to this show. I was never totally compelled to watch the next episode, feeling like I'm going through withdrawals, thinking, I gotta watch the next episode! And was more like, I got nothing better to do. Might as well watch the next episode. And personally, that addictive feeling to me is a clear sign of an amazing show. So I wouldn't call this show amazing, but it was good, it was solid, and entertaining, and overall enriched the Marvel Netflix universe. So now let me get into some spoilers. So if you have not seen the entirety of Season 1 of Luke Cage, you may want to turn this video off now, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So I want to get into a bit more detail on what I was talking about with the issues I had with this show, and in particular was the decision to kill off Cottonmouth halfway through the season and introduce Diamondback as the main villain. It seemed very jarring, and I suppose part of the reason why I felt this way is because I thought Cottonmouth was a much better villain than Diamondback. I did not like Diamondback at all. He was too cheesy, too over the top, not just that costume he wore at the end, but from the very first time he appeared on screen, I was like, geez, this guy is just over the top. I hope I don't see more of him. And sure, they did name drop Diamondback from the beginning by having Shades be sent there by Diamondback to oversee Cottonmouth's operation, but it still felt very jarring when all of a sudden they switched focus to Diamondback as the main villain. Plus, it's a bit too coincidental for me that Diamondback, who owns a huge crime syndicate in Harlem, the one that Luke Cage just happens to be feuding with, just so happens to be Luke Cage's brother from Georgia and the one who framed Cage in the first place. And honestly, I found this whole storyline a bit ridiculous. As for Cottonmouth, I thought he was great, a well-developed, fleshed-out villain, although a bit too similar to Wilson Fisk. However, the main issue with him is that he never seemed like a real match for Luke Cage and was too easy to defeat, which I suppose is why they replaced him with Diamondback, but personally it felt a bit too jarring. I feel it would have worked much better had they finished out Season 1 with Cottonmouth and waited until Season 2 to introduce the story with Diamondback. However, part of the problem there is there might not even be a Season 2 because, the whole Netflix Marvel universe works a bit differently from normal shows because each show sort of builds off another rather than their seasons. As for the rest of the supporting cast in the series, they all worked very well. Detective Misty, her corrupt partner Scarf, Pop, the main motivation for Cage to seek revenge, other characters like Bobby Fish, and the kid who was selling bootleg tapes of the superheroes fighting on the streets, they all worked really well in the series overall and added to the overall feel of the show. My main issue, however, was with Clara the night nurse from Daredevil. I thought she was fine, but like Diamondback, her appearance halfway through the season felt a bit jarring, and how she just sought out Luke Cage because she thinks it would be cool to help superheroes. I didn't quite buy that. I thought they used her well enough for the rest of the series, but I couldn't help but feel that she was shoehorned into the show. But getting back to the villains, my favorite villain character was probably Shades, who started out as just a typical henchman, but became more prominent as the series went on. I thought he had a great story arc, and at one point I even found myself rooting for him, and that's a testament to great storytelling when a show can have me rooting for a character as despicable as that one. But I suppose the constant main villain of the season was Mariah, who I thought was an interesting character that worked well enough, but not quite interesting enough to be the main villain of the show, as she didn't even really want to be involved in the crime game. I did, however, love what they did with her at the end of the season, where you totally thought she was defeated and at her lowest point and she was going down, but in one swift action she completely changes it. So she goes completely free and they have nothing on her, and on top of that she sends an anonymous tip to get Luke Cage arrested and sent back to Georgia to go to prison. So she went from being completely screwed to being the winner who is on top in just a few minutes. So that was a testament to how sneaky of a person she was. So that I thought worked great. But speaking of the ending, other than the Mariah reversal of fortune aspect, I'm not sure I really cared much for the ending, as I found it a bit of a letdown that it ends with Luke being arrested and sent back to Georgia, and it's also not very realistic. When the marshals showed up to collect him, Luke said he was innocent, but the marshals said, well, it doesn't matter, you still owe the state of Georgia time. No. If Luke Cage was innocent this whole time, then actually the state of Georgia owes him time. And then it shows Bobby Fish finding the envelope of evidence that exonerates him. So to me that was quite anticlimactic and felt a bit like Batman v Superman. Spoilers for that movie, but it felt like when Superman died and then they showed the dirt on his coffin, shaking. This is exactly what it felt like here. If you're going to imply he's still alive, then that takes all this thing out of having him die in the first place and renders it pointless. Same thing here. If you're going to show that they have the powers to free Luke Cage, then what's the point of having him arrested? Plus, he's going to still be around for the Defenders, so this whole thing seemed kind of like a waste of time. So that's it for my review of Luke Cage. Be sure to check out a discussion video I'll be doing with Josh from Geeksiders and Don Willie on Luke Cage Season 1, which will be over on Don Willie's channel sometime at the end of October, probably the 28th. So keep an eye out on my channel and Don Willie's channel for more details on that. And be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.